I walk?
This is a very difficult time for me.
Are you comfortable? Do you need any pillows behind you?
No, no, man,
Okay.
thank you. No, I'm fine.
Okay.
How's it going?
You're getting funny in your old age, bro.
Right. Could you get me another piece of paper upstairs, please?
You're getting funny in your old age, man. That's all I can tell you.
We're starting now. Okay. So how are you?
I'm delightful.
Good. Good to see you.
You too, man. If it wasn't you, you know I wouldn't be sitting here to start with. So let's get to. We both love to work, so that's why I'm here, because I know you love it too. And these other two wonderful people that you met and I met seem to fit into the reality of the same love story here. So I'll be very sophisticated at this time.
How did you ever get hooked up in that whole core gallery reading thing?
It happened like everything happens. I was sitting on the street, and this wonderful guy named Paul Maloney.
Oh, wait a minute. So how did you get involved with the whole core?
I was sitting on a friend's porch on the street across the street, and this wonderful guy pulls up in this beat-up van and starts unloading some paintings. I says, "Hey man, what do you got there?" He said, "Well, I'm connected to the core gallery," and then my friend Victor mentioned this wonderful situation, and when I remembered the building, it was this wonderful man who I used to call Papa Steve Castellanos, who had a dry cleaning store there. So, and I used to tease him as a young kid, like, "Oh, we should open up, you know, a place to have music and stuff, you know." So anyway, this was, I think, about 2 years ago, or somewhat close to it. And I said to Paul, "Hey, you ever think about, you know, having a poetry reading there?" He said, "Yeah," but a couple of months went by. So I went to all the shows, and his family was involved, as you know, a group of people. And the gallery was exquisite, and I started to see it as something really important in the community. And the more I realized what was happening there, the more I got involved with these people, and then the next thing I know is I was doing a series, which I thought was well, a couple of times maybe. You know, we're talking about New Paltz, the college town with bars and, you know, not too many rednecks or fascists left anymore. But it wasn't the place that would develop for some reason. As hep as the college is, nothing really develops in the town other than, you know, I mean, the bars, music and stuff, but not on a cultural, historical event that that I believed should develop into something, you know, really worthwhile with a consciousness to it. And the next thing I know, and I think Glenn, we spoke about it immediately. I said, "You're not going to believe this, but I'm going to do a series at the core." So I made a commitment to do 8 of them. And I said every 2 months, because every week you lose the magic. Every month, yeah. But every 2 months, something happens to you. I don't know, maybe it's your psychic, maybe it's spiritual. It's probably everything. But it had a good presence every time, the power of it, the developing of my research. And then I tied in, okay, again, you know, you don't know what you're doing most of the time except the magic of the work. So it unfolded itself. And I did 8 of them, and I didn't know the gallery was going to close. I was hoping I would do 12. I mean, I didn't know, but I said, I'll commit myself to 8, because I never did a hosting of a series. I'm an artist, you know, but when I realized being an artist, I could make it into an art form, being a host, and that's what happened. It became an art form. And the place was packed every time. And we had famous poets, not so famous poets, open mic, and I'm connected to a great magazine, which I think Glenn knows very well too, is the Hunger magazine. So the correlation of the area, you know, let's say a 40-mile radius, basic. We had a couple of people from out of Boston, you know, Albany, whatever. But I would say it was dominated basically by our community. And it was great because there was 3 generations of people in the audience too, sometimes 4. But most of it, you figured young people, it's a young town. But when you started getting, and you know, I'm of another whole generation, so of course the history of it started to unfold into, wow, this is getting really incredible. And the place closed after the 8th reading, except I squeezed one last one in, which was, I didn't feature, so I featured myself and this wonderful young woman, Patty Loudon, who I've been friends with for 10 years, and watching her develop as a poet was quite astonishing too, and Glenn and I spoke of that a little bit, to watch people of that generation find their voice or working towards it. And I think the beautiful thing about the call was I gave everyone a place to do that. And so there was a graciousness about watching what happens to people in that space. There were young kids reading. 3-year-old little girl was writing poetry. A 14-year-old girl. Or, you know, a very famous poet, you know. So it was like that scope of the vision, you know, and the nurturing. I think Robert Wright said something that was really truthful too. It's like what you leave with the audience, what happens in the with the work, the communion that you have with your community. I am a little more larger in my vision, though. I want it to go really out there. I'm not too pleased. I don't want to go there yet. What I wanted to say was, it also kept me tamed. It also kept me away from Rizzi. It kept me away from where I really, so it was like another kind of sharing with the work. I had to develop another kind of psyche here, another kind of language. Although I did sneak in the wars and all the things that we're supposed to be doing as artists, destroying all the capitalist pigs and the rest of it, so I don't want to get into that. But I think that the main thing is, as an artist or as a poet, especially as a poet, I was speaking to people about the fact that a lot of poets got killed, a lot of poets were murdered, a lot of poets were destroyed by their countries, by their governments. So I take it a little more serious than just writing about a fucking tree, man. You know, I love trees, but, you know, leave them outside. And the same thing with animals, they belong outside too. But as far as my consciousness and what I think the consciousness of my country is, as we all know, it's on 0. So how do we get it to 10, to 20, when you have a government that's just raping us on our First and Fifth Amendment again, when you had people like William Burroughs, Allen Ginsberg, and some other monsters coming through that were almost killed, or Henry Miller. To me, because Henry Miller came from Brooklyn to start with, I wrote a poem where the title of the poem was To an American Buddha Who Spoke Brooklyn. And what I meant by that was, he was a Buddha, all right? He was a Buddha for a lot of reasons. A lot of people think he was pornographic and all this other jive-ass stupid shit. Miller woke us up to our senses. He made us understand the beautiful odor of a woman. If that's pornographic, I think that's holy. All right, so you got different interpretations. It's like, I think if you got 18 people sitting in this chair, you're gonna have 18 people telling you a whole different story about everything. But I think what I would like to hear out of the 18 people is they're willing to die for the work. They're willing to change the consciousness of their country. I think that is probably more important, because if you have images that we're fed known as Mr. Bush in a suit and the Pope in some goddamn wheelchair, I mean, give me something more than that, man. You know, I'll bow to a holy man. I'll bow to anything that's holy. I'll bow to a tree. But you got to give me something that's really going to change me. And by changing me, that means I'm going to change, hopefully, the work, the consciousness of the work. Why do we study the work? Who are we in the work? And as far as a spiritual life in the work, you can't do it without being spiritual. You can't do it without being humble. Once your ass gets in the way, you just made a picture of some other jive shit. You ain't doing the work. So the quality of the work and the essence of the work filters through us. There's no doubt about it. But if you're not willing to die, I used to love it when they had the pigs in the audiences known as the FBI or the cops, because we were scaring somebody. Okay, I'm not saying all work is political, man. The painting behind me, you know, there are times where you write lovely, beautiful love poems. Yeah, there's times you write about nature. I mean, we could sit here and name Walt Whitman. Look what Walt Whitman did for us. You can't get bigger than Walt Whitman. As long as I live, I will never be able to write a line, every atom that belongs to me belongs to you. I mean, you can't get more holier than that. I mean, the whole cosmic world has just blew up in your head, and you realize, holy shit, we're all connected here, man. So you don't even have to be intelligent to understand that, you know. So, you know, it's like, I use the word war, I use the word bleed, I use the word beautiful, I use the word cock, cunt, fuck, God. I mean, I use any word that's going to connect us to something inside of us. I think that's the responsibility of the artist. I think, am I rapping a lot here?
You're doing fine.
Okay.
You're doing what we want.
All right. That's all that matters, as long as we have this together. And I think sharing work with you, Glenn, all these years too, and being in and out of each other's life, and watching what you have done with your life gives me that communion. Like when I'm reading in an audience, I'm sorry, 20, 30 people, that's beautiful, but I need a lot of people, because it's like, and I love small, intimate rooms too, but I think that if you have an audience that's intelligent, which most of our audiences are, as you know, this area is amazing for that. I've read in the Norican Cafe, not that that's bad, you got like 300-400 people in a room that only 5 should be in. They're young people, and they're looking, so when you communicate with that generation of people, you know you're saying something. And you don't have to, I mean, it's like, there's something happens with the work that you have a communion and a nuance. You're building something in a room, you know, and it's again, we're describing words to describe words. It's pretty ironic. We're describing, you know, we're sitting here trying to speak about something that is an art form that you're speaking about something, okay? So there's like, the dualities are great. I like dualities. I like paradoxes, you know, dilemmas, you know, it's like. But I think the best word to use to describe this is 2004, coming up, 2003. I think the word energy still applies. I think energy is probably the only thing that we have left to create with. In the real sense, it's like, I'll give you a couple examples. A couple of painters that I really admire. Clifford Still was interviewed once. Clifford Still was a great American abstract painter who probably was one of the most serious, unbelievable beings that you would ever want to read some of his ideas, his lectures. Everybody went to see him, of American painting. And this is how heavy this dude was. And all he did was just enormous paintings of one color with maybe a crack on the bottom of it. And you get a complex looking at this cat's paintings, because you're going, hey, wait a minute, man. This is only a blue painting with a yellow streak. And then you realize, oh, it's the yellow streak that just did it to me. You know, this kind of... So they asked him what he thought about European painters. And he said, well, they make nice pictures. So I had to follow this guy for the rest of my life just because he said that. What was he saying to us? Get off the wall. Get off the still life. They're pretty, so what? Picasso said it too. If you're not a revolutionary artist, you're not an artist. You have to be a revolutionary artist. I have to, and I'm not saying that in the sense that we should go out and destroy everything, but I think we should try at least to do it. I mean, you know, just a little bit, put a crack in it, you know. So, for this area, I remember coming up here as a kid and there were no poetry readings. The college had the famous ones, which was great. E. Cummings, you know, Edna St. Vincent Millay. She went to Vassar, actually. But anyway, so you had, in some ways it was academic. Cummings wasn't totally academic, but he was a Harvard, you know, brilliant man, one of my heroes. Kenneth Patcham, another great American poet. You know, and we can go on naming all the great American poets that we, you know, we studied or read or influenced us. And
when did you hook up with JJ?
Young JJ, Mr. Blitzstein. He was 15 years old, and he was writing poetry and trying to be slick. He was hanging out with a group of young people who were all basically musicians and young people from the high school, and I used to chase them out of my pad and go home and write. So as he started to develop, he was like 15, 16, and he was bringing me poetry. Same thing with Patty. Patty was 16, Mary Rose, there was a whole number of people. But with JJ, I felt JJ had a brilliant, he had some genius in him, and I knew it. So I watched him closer. And Patty also had that, they knew what the poetry was already, organically. They were born with it. You're born. When I was a kid growing up, I didn't decide I was going to be a poet one day. At 7 years old, I think the nun said, read this poem, Rizzi. And it was Barefoot Boy, Longfellow, I think it was. And I said, oh shit, this is too serious. I was a young kid, and I knew there was something going on in that language. What happened to my mind? What happened to me when I knew that the threshold of poetry, the complication, the advocation, the dedication, all of that was in that one breath. And I said, oh shit, I'm in trouble. But I didn't know. I didn't have a language yet, but I knew that something was developing in me, and it continued. So when I met JJ and all these young people, which was what, around 20 years ago. Let's assume that. That's a generation. So when I made friends with this young man, and then when he was living, his mother was a psychic. There's a whole lot of spiritual psychic shit here too. It's not just poetry. I mean, you know, we're talking about metaphysical science. Also, you got to remember this. I mean, it's really amazing because William Carlos Williams was a doctor and a poet. So, you know, so he had both of them going. So when I realized that the hip bone was connected to some word, or if I say a word and I open up your third eye, you know, we're talking about some other thing in the body here. So, you know, it's like, all right, but where's this coming from? That's the unknown surfaces that we cross. And as we know, I think the amazing thing, oh man, every day I curse it. I mean, I wish I could do what Robert did every couple of days. I got to do it every day, man. If you don't do it every day, you're not doing it. I mean, I'm getting really crazy here with it, but I felt not just poetry, but I think just being an artist, the process that you have to go through. And I think Matisse and a couple of the other great ones saying, Cummings also had, he wrote a group of things called 6 Nun Lectures. And he says, if you want to be Mr. Jones next door and, you know, drive the truck and bring the mail, he says, that's cool, but you're not going to do this. So when again, you know, when you're young, you're reading this stuff and you're going, oh, what are these people telling me? But there's no way out. There's no way out. I mean, I've been doing it for 60 years and I might have missed a few days, you know, I did a lot of drugs, as you can imagine, too, so it's like, you know. But the beautiful thing about it is, it doesn't really matter. You're born to do this. Or, you know, it's like the gift of what you receive. Well, here's the other thing about it, too. It's the only, you know, we've all done a lot of things, or I've tried to do a lot. I've tried to teach, I was a bartender, I was a truck driver, I was a soldier. You know, I'd done all of these things for about an hour. You know, they were cool, you know, all right, this is... But there's always this other thing that's going on. It's like something happens to us in this work. And it's like... And we know a lot of people who committed suicide in the work. We know a lot of people that were driven insane by the work. But we also know a lot of people who did this work with the graciousness of doing it. In our country, to get back to our country, why we don't comprehend what the artist does for us. In other countries they do, but yet they'll kill you. You know, like in a lot of countries, they'll nurture you as an artist. You know, they'll make sure that you're covered or give you rent, like in France or Holland, or Denmark's pretty gracious at times. Our country, man, you know, not that I don't even like the correlation of you might as well be a truck driver, because I respect truck drivers. My uncles, people in my family were truck drivers. But it's like, you're better off being a truck driver than being a poet. You know. Some of the great poets proved if you fight hard enough and you give of yourself through the poetry, you could make a difference. You could make a difference. And a lot of artists go to Europe or other countries and become recognized. Robert Frost, I love Robert Frost. I think he was an elegant, exquisite visionary. And he had to go to England. T.S. Eliot, another great poet. The Wasteland probably was one of the greatest poems written in the 20th century. You can't take it, I mean, that's true. And how? There are certain poems that, so what makes, like you asked the question about what makes a great poem, I think what makes a great poem is you've changed many generations of people's consciousness. It doesn't really matter what the poem's about, but what makes that enormity in you know, what makes something that enormous to us as beings? And we happen to be talking about poetry right now. And I probably would have to say that it's probably an art form that allows the artist to process it as simple as possible. You're sitting with a bunch of words, with a group of people, and you're speaking about something that probably sooner or later will enter something in us. If it's our heart, if it's a love poem, if it's a poem of nature, if it's a war poem, you know, it's like, I think the struggles, and I think in some ways the psychological effect it has on us, which that's true too. I think there's a purification process. I think is a good way to put it. I don't like definitions. They just hang you up. So I don't like the word definition. I don't like the word intellect.
Where does the page end and the performance begin?
Hopefully the first sentence. Hopefully. There are sometimes, when you use the word performance, sometimes there's a connection. I'm a performance artist also. I'm a jazz musician, as you know. I also paint, I also draw, I also do collage, I also do whatever. So you have to study you see, that's the thing about the poet. To be a poet, I think you really have to, and I think some of the great artists that we know, I don't want to start naming everybody again, it's like, you have to be a poet to comprehend the universe, you have to be a poet to comprehend your life. I mean, this is really getting dictator. I'm becoming a dictator here, but the reality of it is, I don't mind being a fascist when it comes to this. You have to really be a poet to comprehend the universe you live in. I mean, you really do. In order to understand anything that we're talking about, you know, and it's true. How many things are there to talk about? About 7? I mean, really, what are you talking about? What about death? I talk about death in every poem. I talk about love in every poem. I talk about sex in every, I talk about taking a shit in every, it doesn't matter. You have to experience everything, I hope, all the time. But you have to experience it differently. There's the catch. There's the catch. How many times could you hear the word, I love you? But what goes before it and after it really helps because you got another context. You got another texture. You know.
So when you're hosting at the Core Gallery, that became an art form in itself?
Yes. Yeah. I would have to say the reason it became an art form was if you set up readings with other featured poets, you have to know their work, or at least as much as possible, and then fit it into a language that could develop. You have to, when you're hosting, I always found that if you host, you have to leave that space purified for that person that's going to read. And after they read, you better leave some space there after they read, and the next person that comes into that space should understand what that other person just left there. Or, you know, I mean, so there's a whole, I mean, again, that's another reality. And I think the energy of hosting is, I try to start up here somewhere instead of starting over here, say. You know, instead of starting saying like, oh, today is Monday and we're going to have a poetry reading, and I think that this person who writes poetry has 4 or 5 books and this and that. That's cool. That's information. But where is that poetry going? Where are you coming from? So why not start up here? And then imagine where you're going to go after that. That's how I looked at it. And it's also, the Core was perfect because of the room. There was no distractions in that room. You didn't have a bar. You didn't have people talking. People came there for one reason. 50, 60 people sat down on the chairs, and 50 or 40 people were sitting on the floors and around the wall, and they were there for one reason, to hear poetry. Some of them were there to read on the open mic. So you had all these different realities going, but basically the room was for poetry. I mean, it's a gallery, so of course it was for paintings too. So I incorporated, what I tried to do with the reading and hosting that was to incorporate all of the art forms and then also get political. And also make sure that everyone knows there's a love story going on. And make sure that everyone realizes that here's a chance to really change. Here's a chance to learn something. Here's a chance to tell your community what it can do and what it's not doing, which leads to what? Your community's what? Your country. My community ain't just Main Street, man. I mean, that's really where I'm nurtured, and I eat there and I shit there and I lay there. But our community is our country. If you have a government that's telling you can't read because it's anti-war, or people in Albuquerque, New Mexico is firing teachers because their students went and read anti-war poetry, your fucking country's fucked up, man. This country is fucked up. You just raped the First Amendment and the Fifth Amendment. I'm not 66 years old, a disabled American veteran, so some moron in a suit's going to tell me I can't read poetry that says, you're wrong, bro. You just murdered some people for no reason, and I can't comprehend why you just did the same thing that the fascists did, why I carried a machine gun for this country, and why I'm writing poetry for this country, and why I'm an artist for this country. Yeah, this country made me all of those things, but I'll be goddamn if you're going to kill me. I'll be goddamn if you're going to tell me I can't say what I want to say as an American or as a human being and as a man. You got to be fucking crazy, because I'm going to kill you. Hopefully with the poetry. But I'll kill you another way too. The threshold is, you want to play it? Let's play it. I'd rather dance it with a poem. But if you want to dance it another way, okay, America, let's do it. If you can't do that, then you're not doing your work, man. You know, I mean.
So were there a lot of different ideas coming out at the Core?
Yeah, I would say it covered quite a bit of everything. I mean, you know, we want to talk about homosexuals, lesbians. Yeah, there was some great lesbians and homosexual poets reading there too. Andy Clausen was reading there. Was great friends with Allen Ginsberg, my friend Ray Bremser, you know. Ray Bremser did 16 years in jail. I think he did it for holdups, but he was a poet. And why was he holding up? Well, we know that one too. So, yeah, and there were like professors from the school. Robert Waugh, most elegant man. He wasn't fooling around. He said some shit that scared me. You know, so there was the academic head. There was the street head. There was the kid coming off knowing he's sleeping in the hallway and shit, talking about his poetry. So, you know, the variety made it exquisite. The variety of watching a little 3-year-old girl come in there and read a poem because her father read her Howl, and she wrote a poem called A New Kind of Howl. That's a 3-year-old girl. Now she's 4, and I made her win the Poem of the Year, and we're going to publish her poem in Hunger, the next issue. Now the next issue of Hunger, which is 6 years, probably has some of the great American poets in it. Baraka's in it. Robert Kelly, who's got 50 books of poetry from Bard. You know, Eshelman, one of the great translators and scholars on the other side. Got people coming in from all over France, you know. And then we got us, you know, in there, you know.
Who's us?
Susan McKechnie, hopefully you, Mr. Glenn Rivers, Danny Proper, another great American beat poet. He's sort of hiding somewhere up in Woodstock in the woods, I think. Ray Bremser, Andy Clausen, Janine Palmy Vega. You want me to keep going, man? You crazy? But anyway, that's us. And of course, I'm honored, you know, to have done some of the covers. We had some other great people doing the covers. But just the idea of having an American poetry magazine is astonishing in itself, especially, you know, lasting for 6 years. Most of them small presses in America, as you know. A couple of them lasted a long time, but most of them don't. And to have them, well, again, for the smaller community known as Ulster County, us, it's quite interesting because you have people all over the country and in different parts of the world. I think we got some people, I'm not positive, but I think there's a couple of poems coming from China, Hungary, Poland, but most of it is American poetry. The other thing with American poetry, or poetry, excuse me, it's a language. So I'm going to read poetry in Denmark. So it's kind of strange that I have to be talking to Danish people. A lot of them, they're not going to understand my slang or the nuances of our language. But yet, you know, so I have to think about that too. It's like, with a painting or music, you don't have that frustration or confusion. I shouldn't even say it's a confusion or a frustration, but it is being an artist. It's like if I hand you a paint, like if you show me one of your landscapes, Glenn, it's like, wow, that's beautiful. And you could say that in any language, you know, so it's like, it doesn't matter. And as we know, music is the universal language. But I think combining it, and I think we were talking about that earlier, Kenneth Patcham, and I think there was another American poet who combined jazz. You see, we only have a couple of art forms that are really American. You know, I keep saying American. Well, I'm sitting here, I'm an American man. No matter what I do, this is who I am. So, you know, I tried to leave that a lot of times, but it didn't work, you know. But I think Patcham did something incredible because he took, well, Bob Dylan also did it. I mean, Bob Dylan's a poet in the real sense of, if we want to really discuss what music and poetry is. You know, the 60s, I think a lot of people surfaced. The Doors, I think, wrote some poetry too. Joni Mitchell, you know, well, Billie Holiday, I mean, for God's sake, you know, Bessie Smith, you know, these were poets. I mean, they were called singers, you know, but if you think about what is what is poetry in the real essence, or there's as you know, we established this before, there'd be 5,000 different definitions of a poem, but I think the essence of what happens to us when we hear something that's poetic. You know something. I mean, you know, again.
Was there poetry going on in New Paltz in the 60s?
Yeah, yeah. We had some poetry going on in the 60s. Alan Epstein was here, a wonderful friend. Mikhail Horowitz, who I didn't mention in the Hunger magazine, sorry, but he was another elegant energy. I was here, of course, man. You got to remember the 60s now. Just give me a break here. Wait a minute. Yeah, but there was poetry going down here. There was poetry going down here in the 50s, but not a lot. You got to remember, poetry didn't become a real. Well, again, Edna St. Vincent Millay read sonnets on the radio during World War II to us. So there was poetry in this country, you know. E. Cummings, you know.
Is it my imagination, or is there more going on now?
No, more. It's not your imagination. Because you said that, I'm going to change my looks. Of course there's more going on now. You have, well, rap, hip-hop, that's poetry. I mean, I know I'm going to get killed for saying this, but it's limited. It's guttural. It's street. It's gutter. I fucking dig it. But repetition could get a little boring after a while, you know. I like repetition. I'll even give you one sentence, and then after that, you know, let's go somewhere else, bro. You know, shit, I know what it is to be starving and shit. Yeah, you got to scream. So, you know. But again, it's a generation. It's a necessity that has to be, you know, verbalized in that manner. You know, I'm going to shove it up your face. You know, I mean, so I'm going to shove it up your face. So you need that. But again, it all, again, man, you know, it was necessary, it is necessary, it's good, it's happening, but it's gonna, the limitations. See, this is the other thing. Here I am, 66 years old, I should have been faded, my limitations, man. I don't know what I'm gonna write tomorrow. I'm scared shit. I'm paranoid enough to know that I might not ever write again, man. You know, I mean, you know, I'm sitting there saying, yeah, see, every day I fight it. It's not a.
You bring a poem in that paperback?
Yeah, you told me to.
Yeah, good.
You want me to read one?
Yeah.
I'm glad you shut me up, man. Oh, this fits perfect. Good, see? Everything happens on purpose. Believe it or not, man, I can't believe I wrote this last year. Wow. See, I must be getting old, man. It's called superstition. The crime of talk. I confess the mechanism of desire grew like a bad dream. The network of voices, hot, dark, and slippery. Various kinds of skin. My profile turned a century ugly. Penalties left along the water. The air felt suspicious. And the detail to die ended badly. Proliferation of a ghost re-entering a body. I opened my mouth to discover the jealousy I find in the mirror. A prescription of wet stars, dust in the eyes. Severe if you blink by the door. All alone, you fall off the edge. Help yourself to Spain. Warm, like borning your own heart. A habit to keep real. The weakness for your life you left behind the curtain, and the early light on my face stripped my temperament. Like music that forgot where to fade. Everything I imagined stuck to my tongue. What kind of thing surrounds itself with fire and won't escape when you turn your back? I'm trying to talk around the end, where the piece of fruit reminds me of the danger and the damage and the cheap trip to your throat before the war. The war. You crazier than me, man. You crazier than me.
That's great. So you did that one last year?
Yeah, well, you know I work a lot, so, you know.
Right.
I would assume that with the help of you people, I'm going to work a lot more. But, yeah, that's what else is there to do.
Right.
You know.
Now there's another.
You want another one?
Yeah.
See? I told you were crazier than me. All right, because we're doing it that way, I'll read the next one that was on the page.
Okay.
This one was this year. I think last month. Double cross. The Negro cop is looking for nostalgia and his mind is moving fast. The garbage can influence Frankenstein like a naked rabbi talking to some barbed wire. The motif got no distance because of flesh. Lavender ashes stitch the eyes. Are you shocked, God? My psyche is in a traffic jam and three cans of skulls and a paintbrush and paranoid behavior. Nothing to do with the dead. I went upstairs with a ballet dancer carrying a gun, graceful and out of control, reminiscent of a fag in a pinstripe suit. There's a blank section where you forgive yourself in the vision, and you introduce some noise and call it Pearl Harbor with dancing girls. I'm desperate for the unknown, but my body is a habit. I got no parachute to jump out my dream. Oh, blackbird, sing to me. Why are you sitting in a tree in hot pursuit of a stranger? I shall swallow you like bebop, incomplete as the dark ambulance in the sunset, and thousands and thousands and thousands of miles away from night. I return carrying your voice to a sleazy hotel, crime for a dime, before or after death. Shaved, futuristic, beautiful corpse. The television showed my mother escaping out of my mind. I started eating a rug in order to be connected to my culture. I zapped a rat with paranoia. I betrayed the dead with my X-ray vision. All I had to do was pile the bodies up in neat stacks, handcuff myself to Charlie Parker. I'm living in an age where you can enter an image of the world blowing up and you think you died, flickering and sipping blood. Nobody loves a genius cutting your throat, selling parts of your body as conceptual and multicolor. The next generation is waiting outside with a bomb. Rap the gospel, signifying the badass motherfucker running up the street with your woman.
Whoa.
You asked me to read it, man. But that's it. That's the language. That's our language. That's who we are, man, isn't it? It's all pretty, but it's also vicious. It's all deadly, but it also gives us life. What are we afraid of? That's the main question. What are we afraid of? Each other? Shit. See, the graciousness of who we are and what we're doing here is what? To give each other our life back, or to keep our ass alive a little longer, man. Yeah. So the heartache of it is, we don't seem to be doing very well at times. And that's what that's what scares us. I read the Times yesterday. There's a poet in England, in London, who is asking for political asylum. And where's he from? Well, we know where he's from. You want me to name the country? All right.
Brooklyn?
Palestine, I think. Or it might have been Iraq. It might have been Brooklyn, actually. So they're giving him a bad time. He just happens to be a poet. And he just happens to be a young human being. But he happens to be a poet. And why was he chased? Why was he beaten? And why was he spent 3, maybe 5 years in prison, starving to death, beaten and tortured? And what was his reason for that? Oh, he wrote poetry against his government. Oh, so they try to kill him, but the dude was strong enough to get the fuck out of there, runs to England, and now they're going to play with this cat's head because, what's the word? Oh, the bureaucratic system of the courts. No, they have a whole nother vocabulary, the English. I lived over there. Their class system is really amusing. I just love it when they give everybody, you are now a lord. You have just been honored into the knighthood of, what's that other job? Oh, sir. That's the word. Sir. Oh, and it's called protocol. But in my country, you get a Band-Aid, you take the fucking A train and shut up, man, and just do your work. But...
So speaking of the work...
The work again, yes, sir.
Why don't we have another poem?
Oh, man. You really want another one? All right. One more. You told me only to bring 2, but I brought 45. This one might fit in pretty heavy. It's a long poem, and I don't know if everybody's going to fall, and I shouldn't say stuff. That's not right. But I can't help it. It ain't that long. Well, before I read this poem, I'd like to tell you why I wrote it. Because it's like, you know, when I was a kid growing up, you always heard, extra, extra, read all about it. The Japanese just bombed Pearl Harbor. You know, that was the first time I remember hearing that. It's called Headlines. Headline. 3:21 p.m., March 5, 2003. I ate the audience except one beautiful girl. I wrapped her up in opera music and a bedsheet. I was wearing a mask and boxer shorts. I told her I was a businessman named Sam Beckett from Texas. I was determined and detained at the border because I had too many Indians hiding in my suitcase, and I began to look suspicious every time I took my head off. I was unfaithful to William S. Burroughs in 1945. In real life, I was living in an African hut with a junkie who had too many eyes and convinced me she was the last witness when I crossed out the words rotten meat. And a saxophone player whose teeth needed attention took a long pause, then played a note that woke up an egg, a brilliant yellow lemon sky, half the size of my face, cracked the ceiling. It was getting dangerous on Mott Street. Headline. 2:14 p.m., March 6, 2003. Immediate evil. The perfect kiss taught us, ignore the sounds in your head. Watch for the killer in someone else's eyes. Listen for the generation who abandoned the image you were real. And the desire trapped you standing by the window in the haunting exchange with your shadow. You got shy and invited death to be your wife. The seclusion prolonged the rage, and you kept whispering to your wife, death. Pay attention to the topless moon. It's perishable. I'm selling gospel to shooting stars, and the background colors are a down payment so you can return to the thought that you came from. During the repairs on space in your mind, I'm only influenced somebody who's dead. Headline. 2:34 p.m., March 7, 2003. Ritual. Rip up Venus. There are no more victims. The object under the bed is innocent. As Bruno the Killer, studying an abstract idea, how the second half of the last movement evaporated. Between two generations of rednecks in Cincinnati, I arrived on Houston Street carrying a pig who was a shaman with a beautiful voice. I managed to control myself with cryptic words that would open my skull. The situation got sick like an assembly line of human parts. Persecuted bitch with small tips, low-budget cat house which serviced the dead, territory if you bleed too long, unusual identity, important people with a vampire buttoned up in a small suit, jerking rhythmically, naked dilettante decorate the gutter, Izzy Pop lost his cock. Headline, 3:30 p.m. March 8, 2003. I arranged the suicide to lean against the wall with a cigarette dangling from its mouth, talking to a drag queen who spoke only German and had sex with Lee Harvey Oswald. The most dangerous thing to say to a ghost, let's go kill some rich people. I had to audition for a killer on 23rd Street who was in love with a Hungarian actress that felt incomplete as a woman, found satisfaction stabbing opera singers, and punishment is to grow old in a dive with a Palestinian who has no arms, no legs, and that came off and claims you have the same mother. It's so uncomfortable being romantic with a corpse and the terrible smell the world leaves on the floor. I had to decorate my eyes with dirt and small radios, fill my mouth with rubber, paint my heart the shape of a limousine. No need for a personality. The interlude is a cardboard house that's burning. This is the work that never ends. Get paralyzed as a method actor. Jasper Johns needed a refrigerator to hide his body. The golden egg wants a quick fuck before it gets too dark. Nowhere is a place that's struggling in my hands for a different story. The trenches of my skin bring collectors all the way from hell. I'm involved in behavior that stains the music, just like a bomb blowing up in your mind. That's it, man. That's it.
That's great.
Thank you, man.
Yeah.
Why do you get me crazy, man?